Welcome to the Cascade PBS Ideas Festival podcast. I'm Paris Jackson, host of the newsfeed on Cascade PBS and your host for this podcast. America has become more isolationist, with the current administration moving away from traditional American norms and from once strong alliances. To speak to that growing departure, Ryan Knutson, host of the Journal podcast, sat down with travel expert Rick Steves to discuss traveling in 2025 and Europeans' perceptions of Americans after a succession of changes to the world order. The conversation happened in late May at the Cascade PBS Ideas Festival in Seattle. In the talk, Steves explains why he believes a lot of Americans have ethnocentric views, where the world is seen from their cultural lens and other cultures are critiqued from that viewpoint. Steves argues that ideology has led to a lot of problems we're facing in the world right now. And he suggests if everyone traveled before they could vote, the world would be a more stable, just, and beautiful place. What you'll hear is a call to action from Steves to stand in solidarity with others at home and abroad, and why he hopes that America will change the course it's on. Let's get into it.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ryan Knutson, host of the Journal podcast, the Wall Street Journal's flagship daily podcast about money, business, and power. I'm here today to the Cascade PBS Ideas Festival for a live conversation with one of America's most well-known tour guides, Rick Steves. Rick, welcome to the show.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
So for those of you in the room, Rick Steves is a man who needs no introduction. But for those of you listening at home, you might be thinking, who is Rick Steves? So just a quick bit of background. Rick Steves' first trip to Europe was in 1969 when he was 14 years old, and he's been addicted to traveling ever since. He parlayed that addiction into one of the most well-known travel businesses in the US. He's got a line of popular travel guides, he's taken tens of thousands of people on tours around Europe, and he's had a travel show on PBS since the 1990s. Rick Steves has built a philosophy around travel as a political act, an act that fosters understanding, challenges stereotypes, and in his words, fights xenophobia. At the same time, something strange is happening. Travel has never been easier. But while record numbers of Americans are now traveling abroad, the US is also becoming more nativist and more isolationist. So what does Rick Steves make of this contradiction? Are people just traveling the wrong way? And do people even need a Rick Steves in the age of smartphones and artificial intelligence? Welcome to The Journal, our show about money, business, and power. I'm Ryan Knutson. Coming up on the show, a conversation with Rick Steves. All right. Housekeeping out of the way. So I'm, as we've been talking about, and everybody in the green room knows, I'm on parental leave right now, and my 9-month-old son is here, hopefully sleeping with Jake, with the babysitter right now. But when they reached out to have a conversation with you, I was like, I have to do this. And because I'm on parental leave, I felt like the first question that I have to ask you is about my own upcoming trip, which is my wife and I are taking our 9-month-old and his older brother, who's 2.5, to Europe this summer. It's a very controversial thing to do, to travel with small children. So what's your take?
Well, I had 20 years of experience with traveling with our kids.
Yes.
And they were the same ages as yours, like 2.5 years apart or something like that. And my big advice, if you've got kids your age and you ask, where should we go? I would say to Grandma and Grandpa's on the way to the airport. You know? I mean...
Yeah, they're right there, Grandma and Grandpa.
There you go. Honestly, I would say if you've got 2-week vacation, have a week with the kids at a fun forest here, and then have a week of adult travel in Europe. Having said that, we never did that. We took our kids to Europe every spring. We took our kids out of school throughout the grade school years in April, and they had a better education in Europe. And I am so committed to the idea that if you can afford it, and if you're willing to compromise from an adult travel point of view to make it a family occasion, it is beautiful parenting, and you will never regret it.
Any memorable moments from those trips, especially in the early years?
Yeah. I remember standing in the stairwell of a hotel in Copenhagen with a little 2-year-old boy that would not stop screaming because it's supposed to be daytime and it's dark.
Yeah.
He didn't know what jet lag was or what
Right.
time differences were. I remember on another trip realizing this is such a delightful dinner we're having on Lake Como in northern Italy. It's just like romantic, and we've got our little boy with us, and he was face down in his spaghetti, sleeping. I mean, jet lag hits little kids really hard,
just like
in a
that.
good or a bad way. But a wonderful thing we learned is traveling with kids in Europe makes you very approachable and very fun. And you meet more people that you wouldn't meet otherwise. Mm-hmm. If you have any ideals of keeping your kids away from this kind of food or that kind of candy, forget it, because European grandparents love to ruin those kind of highfalutin ideas with little treats.
Yeah, as do the American grandparents too.
I love it. And it's full of great memories.
Yeah.
And the greatest memory is right now when my kids are like in their 30s, to know how comfortable they are with the world and how they had an advantage because their parents were privileged enough or had the priorities in order enough to make sure those kids got out of this country and realized this is not the norm.
At what age do you think they learned that lesson?
It was a growing thing, but it's the sensibility you gain when you realize that there's cool people that find different truths to be self-evident and God-given. Mm-hmm. And in my family, we always do it this way. And then you realize, oh, I guess other people do it differently. It's kind of fundamental. But sadly, a lot of Americans, well beyond their childhood, still have that childish ethnocentrism that is the root of a lot of problems we're facing in this world right now. I really believe if everybody traveled before they could vote, this world would be a much more stable and just and beautiful place.
Well, I want to talk about that, but before I do, I want to talk a little bit about business, given that we are primarily a business show. So before the pandemic, in 2019, you had $100 million in revenue, and then how many years of zero revenue? Just 2020, 2021?
Well, throughout the pandemic, we had negative revenue because we had 100 people on the payroll and no income.
And you kept them on the payroll, too?
Yes, we did.
Mm-hmm. But as a private business, you don't have the pressure from shareholders other than yourself.
We don't have the pressure from shareholders, but if shareholders were smart, they would understand that when you have a great team of 100 people, and suddenly something unpredictable happens and you can't earn any money, you don't want to disband that team. Mm-hmm. You'll need that team when you get back into normalcy again. Mm-hmm. That's the pragmatic wisdom of keeping your staff together. But I think it's also just an ethical thing to do. For 30 years, I had been making money off of my hardworking, mission-driven staff. And for 3 years, I'm not making money off of them. Well, that's part of being a good businessman. And I just think I'm so thankful I was able to, I had enough reserve capital to make the payroll through those years. That's a lot of payroll, 100 people for 2 years or 3 years. But right now, looking back at it, it was sabbatical for everybody. And, thank God we're back on board and life is good.
How is life these days for business-wise? Are you back to where you were pre-pandemic levels?
In the tourism business that I'm in, you just always rate it to 2019. We sold how many books in 2019? We took how many people on our tours in 2019? What's going on in 2023? Well, it's not quite there. 2024, back to 2019. This year going forward, we're doing better than 2019. So I'm in it for the long haul, and we're right on track now.
So there's like a before the pandemic and after the pandemic when it comes to travel. Have you seen travel change in any noticeable ways in terms of what people do or what happens?
Well, I just do Europe, so my experience is from Europe, but I think it's a fair look at travel in general. During the pandemic, for one thing, people didn't just sit around. I noticed they really invested in their cultural charms and their infrastructure for tourism. And we come out of the pandemic after this 2-year hiatus, and Europe was a better place to travel, just physically. And also, during the pandemic, of course, people wanted to have the public, but they had to control the crowd so people would be spaced out and for their health. And they realized, wow, we can control the crowds by requiring admissions purchased and time tickets in advance. And today, years after the pandemic, I find a lot of these sites that are burdened with too much popularity have realized we're just going to keep that process where you have to have a ticket in advance, and now we have no more chaos at the door. Before the pandemic, when I was in Amsterdam, I would just drop by Anne Frank's house to see how long the line would be. It'd be hundreds of yards long. And I would just think, oh, what a mess. Now, you go to Anne Frank's and there's no line because every half an hour, 100 people show up and go in, or whatever their allotment is. Same thing with the wonderful monastery in Milano where Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper is. That used to be Italian chaos there in front of it. And now you go there and it's totally
it's like you wouldn't even know.
You wouldn't even know it. And 3 times an hour, 50 people show up and they got their reservation in advance.
So that's better. Anything worse?
The thing that's worse about travel these days is too many people looking at it through their lenses or their screens, and this notion of Instagram trends and crowdsourced information where everybody just goes where everybody is supposed to go.
Yeah.
So we have a situation in Europe where there's more people than ever traveling, and more than ever, people are traveling in the crowded times instead of the uncrowded times, and they're going to the most famous sites. So you got this incredible flood of people to 6 sites in London or Paris or Rome, and then everybody goes home thinking, it is miserable. You couldn't even get into Madame Tussauds Wax Museum in London. And they don't realize that there's 90% of the sites that really are wide open.
This is something that's been happening, obviously, on a much longer scale. And one of the things, you recently published a book on the hippie trail, which is just your notebook, basically, from 1978 when you were 23 years old, going from Istanbul to Kathmandu, which you discovered during the pandemic. We were all looking for things to spend our time with. I was binge watching Rick Steves' shows so I can have some escapism. You were looking through your notebooks and reminiscing on old times. But one of the things that really struck me in your book was how you said that you packed enough film to take 9 photos a day.
Right.
And I thought to myself, wow, I take 9 photos a minute when I'm traveling.
I'm old enough to know that I just have that memory that you would never go click, click, and I'll do another one, click, because you had 9 a day, because you had 36 in a canister, and you're on the road for 70 days, and you already have 20% of your packing light bag filled with film canisters. You have divided out, 20 rolls times 36, divided by how many days, and that must have, if I did my arithmetic correct, it must have been 9 a day.
Yeah, I don't know if you fact-checked yourself there at the end, but it's also just like you can't. A trip like that's just not even possible in today's world, where you were going around, you were writing about how you're on the bus and you don't really know much about where you're going. You're asking people that are sitting next to you, do you know anything about where we're headed and what we can do and get there? And it was just, you're flying by the seat of your pants. But now, I mean, that era is gone. Or do you think there's still ways you can find that kind of magic?
Ryan, you're talking about an age when there was not a glut of information. There was not enough good travel information in 1978 when I did this. And when you leave Istanbul and head east, for me, it was like going behind the dark side of the moon. It occurred to me, even as a 23-year-old, there's not another soul that knows me between here and Seattle. And I don't know anybody between here and Seattle. And I'm heading that way with no internet, with just a few traveler's checks in my money belt, and no guidebook, and a bunch of hippies ad-libbing it all the way to the end of the hippie rainbow, Kathmandu. And then I was hoping to find a one-way flight back to Europe. It was an adventure. You can't do that adventure today, but the takeaway from my hippie trail book is that, okay, I'm 23 years old, 1978, doing the ultimate road trip. On the last year, by the way, that you could do it, before the Shah fell and Khomeini came in Iran, and before the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan the next year. So that was the end of the hippie trail. It was the perfect time in my life, the perfect time to do the hippie trail, and I journaled it with a 60,000-word intimate journal, and I documented with all these photographs. I mean, it was just like 45 years later, it's just dying to be a book, and I didn't even know I had it until COVID, and then I remembered I have this journal. But about can you do that now, the takeaway is you can't do the physical trip, but you can have the hippie trail experience, even in our comfortable age, if you get out of your comfort zone, recognize we can learn more about our home by leaving it and looking at it from a distance. And when serendipity knocks, you say yes. And I am inspired by people who are in their 20s now that are having a hippie trail experience by doing that real travel. And that's the fundamental decision travelers have to make. is, am I just going to do the bucket list thing, or am I going to do, let's explore the world and lose ourselves in it? And I just love, that's our mission where I work, is to equip and inspire Americans to venture beyond Orlando. That's it.
When was the last time you were in Orlando?
I stay away from Orlando. I don't think they like me there. I was doing some...
Their slogan just must be, Rick Steves is wrong.
No. Here's the deal. Go to Disney World 4 or 5 times, but then try Portugal, you see. A lot of people, they travel all their life. They do Cancun, they do Orlando, they do Disneyland, they do Vegas, they do a Caribbean cruise, they go back to Orlando a couple of times. That's their whole world. And they're surrounded by other privileged Americans that can do that kind of stuff, and they come home and they think they've traveled. Well, no, you had a vacation, and there's nothing wrong with it, but it's a lost opportunity. And for me, I've been thinking about this a lot lately because I've been giving talks about the hippie trail, and my own teaching has evolved over the years to think that there's 3 kinds of ways you can be a traveler. You can be a tourist, or a traveler, or a pilgrim. And I don't think you want to do all of any of them, with none of the others, but you can mix it up. And the default for Americans is all tourist, fun in the sun and the beach. And that's vacation, but you're not learning about the world. And we need to learn about the world.
What's a quick definition for traveler versus pilgrim?
Traveler versus pilgrim, I think the traveler is learning about the world, and the pilgrim is learning about him or herself within the world. And I love that. To me, as a tour guide, for 25 years, I was leading people around Europe on Rick Steves' Europe tours. Now I take those tours because I really have so much respect for the guides that we have, and I would love that experience. But for me, the challenge is to help Americans get out of their comfort zone, to see culture shock as not something you avoid, but something that's constructive. It's the growing pains of a broadening perspective. And culture shock just needs to be curated. And that's what a good guide does. A good guide does not protect you from culture shock. A good guide turns it into a broadening experience. And Americans tend to be, well, you remember when people called ugly Americans? That doesn't mean they're bad or evil, it just means they're ethnocentric. And the challenge for us is, because we're a big country, we can think we're the norm. You don't have ethnocentric Norwegians and Greeks. You know, you have ethnocentric Russians and Chinese and Americans and Germans. Big societies can be ethnocentric. So we're the biggest, and our challenge is to get away from that. So I love having that be one of our missions when we're traveling.
Well, so as I was mentioning earlier, more Americans are traveling abroad now than they ever have before. There's a Pew study out not too long ago that said that 76% of Americans have left the country once. Half of Americans have traveled to between 1 and 4 countries. And yet, we're seeing in the US over the last several years, this America first political shift, isolationism, people are becoming the more nationalistic. Are people traveling wrong?
Well, I think the people that are traveling are the people that probably don't need to travel as much as the people who are not traveling. Half of America does not travel. Half of America is afraid of the world. Half of America dreams of building walls. The takeaway when you travel is you realize how it is folly to think that you'll be safer if you build walls. If you build walls, you're planting the seeds of instability and danger for your society. And what we need to do is build bridges to the other 96% of humanity outside of our country. And that's just a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing from an ethical point of view and a love your neighbor point of view. And it's also a beautiful thing from just a pragmatic security point of view. It is so tragic to think that we can be safer by withdrawing from the world, by letting Voice of America become Voice of China, And that's what we're doing right now with this mania for pumping people's fears, frankly. We are the most fearful. I'm just so tired of hearing people say, have a safe trip. When somebody tells me have a safe trip, I'm inclined to say, well, you have a safe stay at home. Because where I am traveling statistically, and I know statistics are optional these days, but where I'm traveling statistically is safer than where you're staying. Americans live in a very dangerous place, you see. So I lament the loss of bon voyage. Remember, if you're old enough, when people used to say, bon voyage, have a great trip. When I went on the most dangerous trip of my life, Hippie Trail, it was bon voyage. And I came home with a broader perspective, on track to have a very fulfilling life. That was a beautiful, beautiful experience. Fear is for people who don't get out very much. The flip side of fear is understanding, and we gain understanding when we travel. Who are the most fearful people in our society? People with no passports, that let commercial news shape our perspective. And that is, if it bleeds, it leads, you know? And that makes us fearful. And then powerful people can manipulate us through our fears, and that threatens the fabric of our democracy. We need to travel and not be so darn afraid of the rest of the world. It's a beautiful place.
You've been on this mission. You've been on this mission now for 50 years to try to get people to get outside their comfort zone and to travel, and yet, still, most people aren't doing it, as we also point out the flip side, half the people aren't. And also, there's recent government data that shows that the #1 place that people go when they go outside the country is Mexico and the Caribbean. So it's not really...
It's not even Mexico. It's a resort on the coast of Mexico.
Right, of course. But so do you feel like you're losing the battle? That you're using a thimble on a sinking ship?
It's a tough challenge, I'll tell you, because there's it's a real challenge to get people to have a hunger for becoming a citizen of the planet. My favorite souvenir is a broader perspective when I come home, and kind of a dual citizenship, a keener awareness of how great it is to be an American, because I'd only live here. I'm cut out to be an American. But at the same time, a broader perspective, so I'm in a sense a citizen of the planet as well. Yeah, we haven't, right now is a tough time, but it's going to be a constant challenge, I think, for Americans to look at the long picture when it comes to what's good for our world here. And we're threatening it now by pulling back. But the only chance we have is to be part of the family of nations. There's so much of the world that wants to be good, but it needs leadership. And maybe this is ethnocentric, but nobody can provide that leadership like we can. So if there's something going on that all the family of nations need to band together to make happen, whether it's beating Hitler or stopping climate change or who knows what, America at the table doubles the traction that initiative's going to get. And when we pull back and build a wall, that's just surrendering to that threat. And when you talk about making America great, what is great about America is the ideals of America that inspire societies all across this planet to have our ideas of a pluralistic society and justice and freedom and democracy. And when we pull back, those ideals, they still flicker and shine and inspire nations, but they're not as strong and resilient as when we're out there engaged. So the sad consequence of us pulling back and building walls, when you're thinking about America, making America great, is those ideals become at risk. And I love those ideals, and I love how America can power those ideals from a global point of view.
We'll be back with the Journal live at the Cascade PBS Ideas Festival after this.
BECU. You've heard the name, seen the letters. But what does BECU stand for? Simply put, not-for-profit BECU stands for people, for charting your own path, for choosing what's right for members instead of what's profitable for someone else, because they are the reason our credit union exists. So we do everything in our power to help them reach their financial goals. BECU. Power in people. All Pacific Northwest residents are eligible to join. Federally insured by NCUA.
Thanks to Amazon for the generous support as the host sponsor of the 2025 Cascade PBS Ideas Festival.
You've gotten more attention or become more outspoken in recent years about your political views, which you've been talking about a little bit so far. You endorsed Kamala Harris for president. You're pretty outspoken as an advocate for the legalization of marijuana. How has that affected your business to be more outspoken about politics?
I guess I've gotten to the point where my business is strong enough that I don't make my personal political decisions based on what's good for my business. I remember when we were getting into the Gulf War, and I just didn't believe that this was the right thing for our country to do. And I put up a peace sign outside of my office in Edmonds. And I was across the street, just walking down the street from my office, and a man said, "Hey, Rick, I bet you if you realized how much that peace sign was costing your business, you would have thought twice about putting it up." And it occurred to me, really? You would support a war you don't believe in for what's good for your business? That honestly did not even register to me that was an option for a person with any ethics at all to support a war by calculating how it would impact its business. And now I've been an outspoken advocate about how racist and non-productive and wrong-minded and against civil liberties our prohibition against marijuana is, for example. And I'm bringing home a European sensibility to that, because in Europe a joint's about as exciting as a can of beer, and it's a laughable thing in Europe that they would lock anybody up for smoking marijuana. Well, every once in a while I'll meet somebody when I'm out giving a talk, and they say, "Rick, we know what you think about marijuana, and we're not going to take your tours, and we're not going to use your guidebooks." And all I can think is, Europe's going to be more fun without you.
But so, do you feel like that you have alienated part of a potential customer base?
No. Okay. Does the openness that I don't believe President Trump is good for America, does that alienate people from going on my tours? That would be the immediate question, I suppose. I think people, when they want to go to Europe, they want good information, and my information is so good that they will just hold their nose and consume it. Because we get a lot of people all across the political spectrum taking our tours. We take 30,000 Americans on our tours every year. We have 100 busloads of Americans in Europe today at the same time, all over Europe. And for me, I love the fact, not that we've got a bunch of progressive people that love their escargot, having a good time, but we've got a lot of people that are dealing with some pretty exciting culture shock, who are having their fears challenged and their sensibilities challenged by other societies that have the same challenges, that are addressing those challenges differently, and in some cases better. So for me, the most profitable person on my tour bus would be the more conservative person that's going to have a more broadening experience. So I rally my guides. I've got 100 Europeans who are guides for me. And, they say it's complicated when we have mega people on our bus. Hey, this is what it's all about, everybody wants to better. I think everybody wants to understand the world better. And here's our opportunity. It's a golden opportunity to help people with a narrow perspective come home with a little broader perspective. And long story short, if my political outspokenness has had an impact on my business, if it scared away a few people, that has more than been mitigated by how much of a publicity stunt it's been.
Because you get more headlines.
And I get far more headlines.
But then you sort of
legalize marijuana, and all of a sudden, twice as many people are buying your books,
Well, it's funny, I was asking people, I was like, I'm interviewing Rick Steves, like, what should I ask him about? Everyone's like, ask him about marijuana.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I don't, what's the...
Just this morning, I'm a board member of NORML. I had to leave my board meeting early to come here.
Which is the group that's...
NORML is the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. NORML, okay?
Have you thought about getting into the marijuana business in some fashion?
I've had so many marijuana entrepreneurs want to name a strain of cannabis after me. And as a matter of principle, I want nothing to do with the green rush, and actually, that's been a good decision from a business point of view, because the cannabis industry is in terrible straits right now. But
what are some of the names that people have pitched to you?
I have no idea. What, for those strains?
Yeah, Rick Sativa, something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Rick Steve Viva. I don't know, but for me, it's easy to joke about marijuana, but for me, it is a very serious issue dealing with racism, mass incarceration, stoking a black market that enriches and empowers gangs and organized crime rather than provides a highly regulated industry that employs people. And fundamentally, it's against our civil liberties. So I give talks all over the country about marijuana. And I can, as a business person, as a Christian, as a parent, as somebody who would be kind of, you'd surprised, what do you really think about that? I have no problem saying I work hard all day long. If I go home, I'm a tax-raising, church-going, grandkid-adoring, hard-working American citizen. I have every right to just smoke a joint and stare at the fireplace for 3 hours. Because that is my civil liberty. Now, do I have a right to sell it to a minor or get high and go drive? Of course not. Throw the book at me. But it's a principled civil liberties stance. And it's one of those things that I just love taking home sensibilities from my travels. And there's a lot of easy causes you could get into, but when I got into ending the prohibition against marijuana by our government, that was a hard one to go because it was scary back then to talk about that if you were a respected business person or whatever. But I brought home that European sensibility. And that's what, for me, is really fun, is to travel and to realize we've got the same challenges. How are you guys doing it? And then come home. It's kind of like, I think of a travel writer kind of like a medieval jester. You know, in the Middle Ages, the king gave the jester room and board in order to be annoying. He was told to get out of the castle, hang out and tell dirty jokes with the kids in the ravine, find out what's going on in the barrio, and then come back behind the walls of that castle and tell the king what's going on out there, you know? And as travelers, we can, in a sense, do that. And as somebody who orchestrates travels, we can help travel provide that function. Go out, find out how they're doing it over there, and come home and respectfully challenge your neighbors to open up and think more creatively about how to deal with these exciting challenges.
So what are people saying about America now when you're out being the jester?
Well, that is a very common concern when people are traveling in 2025. And a lot of people are afraid to go to Europe because Europeans might not like President Trump. It's kind of like, do you really want to go to Canada, considering what we've just done to Canada? Well, as far as Europe goes, I've been over there a lot. I've got all sorts of colleagues leading groups around today. We know what the sentiment is. Europeans are saddened by our president. They are confused by how our government, our society can elect him 2 times. They are discouraged. They are abandoned. And they are sad because they need America in the arena with the forces for good. And for Americans to go over there, they wonder, is this a good time to go over there? I'll tell you, I love the fact that Americans are interesting to Europeans, and we're twice as interesting now than we were a year ago. And they want to talk, but nobody that I've ever met is going to take it out on you for who your president is, unless you decide to wear a red hat that says what it's going to say, you know.
So you haven't felt any hostility when you travel?
No hostility at all. If you do, it's some drunk guy in a beer hall in Munich. And that's just what he does for a living, is he gets drunk and he spouts off stupidly. You know? Yeah. But any decent, thoughtful person is going to want to talk to you because they've got an angry, fearful, potential base of an autocrat in their own country going on. That's what's striking to me is every country, no matter how hip that country may seem, has its base, its right-wing base. And this is a real threat. And it boils down a lot to the fear of refugees, you know. And it also boils down a lot to how wannabe autocrats, there's a playbook for them to read. Nobody's ever turned it into an actual huge plan like Project 2025, but it's essentially the same thing. Mussolini had it, Franco had it, Hitler had it, Orban has it, Erdogan has it, and it's just, you can read that playbook and you go tick, 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 tick. Every time you look at the news, it's one more tick. Oh, you got to get rid of you got to silence the professors, tick. You got to demoralize the respect for journalism, so you silence CBS by suing them and they don't want to lose their license. Oh, you need a place to put your political opponents. Oh, well, you don't have concentration camps, but you got a great prison in El Salvador. In fact, that dictator will build 5 more if you ask him. You know, you can disappear people now. I never thought we would have that word disappearing people north of the border. I was really into that challenge south of the border 20 years ago when people were disappearing all the time. We got that now. It is disappearing people. There are things going on now in our society. Solidarity. We all celebrated solidarity when Lech Walesa and the dock workers in Poland were standing up against the Soviet Union. It was solidarity that brought down the Soviet Union. Anybody who cares about civil liberties and people's struggles was inspired by solidarity in Central America with Guatemala and El Salvador and Nicaragua back in the day. Right now, the only way our democracy is going to survive, I believe, is if we can employ the power of solidarity right here in our own country. This is wild times that we're living in, and it's exciting to be clued in, and we're going to do it, but we've got to get our act together, and that's called solidarity.
Why do you think this is happening, though? Because, I mean, the U.S. spent, 70 years post-World War II building bridges, and now there's a lot of effort to try to tear some of those bridges down. So what's driving that, do you think? Fear,
people that have felt neglected. I mean, there's good, this is beyond the realm of a travel writer's talk, but I would just think there's really good reasons for angry people on the right to support the promises of Trump. I don't think they're very sophisticated to believe his promises, but if I was in some of those situations, I could probably see me and my friends having that as our point of departure. When you travel, when you are an educated elite, you might look at things with a little more savvy. For me, my secret juice, I think, is the fact that I'm a historian. I got my degree in European history, and I'm a traveler. So being a traveler, I'm less ethnocentric, and being a historian, I'm less chronocentric. I really believe in the value of history, and I really believe in the value of getting to know people you're afraid of. I mean, when you're threatened by somebody, you're probably more afraid than you need to be. You just don't know them very well. So when we travel, we get to know our enemies. It's a beautiful thing if you travel well. And then when you come home, it's harder for their propaganda to dehumanize us. And when we get home, it's harder for our propaganda to dehumanize them. You've made the world a better place. That's just one of the beautiful values of travel.
Have you thought about traveling more within the United States? Because, one of the things that people, there's a big divide, speaking of bridges that need to be built between the left and the right, and people, I think you'd self-describe yourself as a coastal elite, well-traveled, but a lot of people on the right feel very talked down to, and it's very paternalistic, and so.
No, it's absolutely true, and that's something I need to work on. Lately, Ryan, I've been thinking a lot about walls. I'm fascinated by walls. The Berlin Wall, the wall in Belfast between Protestants and Catholics, the wall in the Holy Land. There are physical walls and there are metaphorical walls. We have a huge wall in our country between red and blue, and it's a metaphorical wall. My takeaway from the Holy Land is, because I've heard so many people talk about the wall in Israel as if they know what it is. Typically, these people only talk to people on one side of the wall. In the Holy Land, any good tour operator or tour guide will embrace the idea of dual narrative travel. You can't learn about the wall unless you give a voice to people on both sides of the wall. It's the same thing in Belfast. You don't know that wall unless you've gone on a Protestant-based tour and a Catholic-based tour. Then you can make the decision. But you gotta honestly hear both sides of the wall, or you have no business opining on that wall. And my challenge is to better understand the people on the other side of our metaphorical wall. When I give a I've been talking at rallies lately, and I don't wear blue. I specifically wear purple, which is blue and red put together, if I understand that correctly. And I'm excited about a partisan debate, and I long for a good principled debate between the pragmatic, responsible Republican point of view and the idealistic, loving, liberal point of view or Democratic point of view. Okay, there will be a time for that. But right now, it's not blue against red. It is America against autocracy. That's fundamental. That's why I wear purple. We're all in this together.
Another trend in travel right now is that foreign visitors to the U.S. are declining pretty significantly. I think Canada might be the #1 decline year over year. Would you give your best Rick Steves pitch for why people should come to America as a tourist?
To be honest, if somebody asked me, if they're a European or Canadian, should I go to America? I'd say no.
Why?
Because we should pay the price for our policies. I think the only thing that's going to wake America up, sadly, is the equivalent of the cost of eggs. I would not vote, and I'm privileged. I've got enough money to pay triple for the eggs, and I'll still have my omelet, But it is so fundamental, the values that are on the line for us right now. And if you have to simplify it and diminish it to the cost of gas or whatever, so be it. What we're going to find is the policies of today are not going to reward the working class people that voted for Trump. He only can get elected with the working class, but what is his first priority? Just look at his policies and it'll be very clear. How long will it take for his masses of frustrated people with legitimate concerns to be aired? How long will it be for them to get a more long-range understanding of what policies are best for them? I don't know, but I think we're gonna pay a steep price in many realms, and one of them will be tourism. Well, tourism is one of the biggest employers on the planet. And the brand of America is something I've long been tuned into, because way back during Bush days, when it was Bill Clinton, advertisements in Europe were filled with American jingles and Beach Boy vibes and California. And then as soon as you get George Bush, all the advertising agencies in Germany say, comb out all of the Americana, because that no longer sells, you see. So if you're just talking money and trade, the brand of America is something for real. And with Obama, America was cool. And people wanted to consume America. They wanted to wear America. Today, do you think people want to consume and wear America? I don't think so, and it's going to just get worse. I just wrote an editorial that ran all over the country, and it was kind of obscure, but it was comparing what's going on in our country today with what was going on in Egypt after the Muslim Brotherhood Revolution when Morsi took power. And I was in Egypt, and Morsi was this big grassroots revolution, and they threw out all of their overlords, and they became sort of a Muslim revolutionary society. But the guy didn't know how to run that society, and everything was just grinding to a halt. Just like we have air controller problems, and we have FEMA not to be there, and just like we have no more people coming in on tourism here. When I was in Egypt, whenever anything went wrong, it was just kind of a joke. If somebody spilled a glass of wine, somebody would go, Morsi. They would just, their president's name or their prime minister's name, if the lights went out, Morsi. And I think in our society, when things are going to go south in a couple of years, people are just going to go, Trump, Trump, Morsi. So we can learn from other societies that have lost track of what really works. When Trump vilifies the deep state, cue the menacing music, he's vilifying the institutions that make America America. If America didn't have a deep state, it would not be even recognizable as what we all know and love. So we have to recognize the institutions are what makes America great. And ironically, That's what's being challenged and threatened right now.
We have 1 minute left. I want to do a little speed round, so as quick answers as you can possibly come up with. Have you thought about retirement?
I just turned 70, and I'm so thankful I found a niche, and I've been doing the same thing with laser focus, where I'm meant to be, and I'm having more fun than ever.
Most people will travel when they retire, so what would you do?
I'm like, I spend 100 days a year in Europe working on my guidebooks, working on my TV shows, and helping my tour program. It's like breathing straight oxygen. So I don't know what I'm out of balance. I'm just a hopeless case. I just love doing my work, and I'll do it as long as I'm physically able. It's a big turn on for me.
Perhaps the most astonishing thing I learned about you when I was doing this research was that you do not participate in any airline frequent flyer mile programs, which I thought has got to be the biggest loss of value for you. You must be a million miler many times over.
I have no idea. But I'm in such a good mood when I go to the airport. I don't want to remember whatever you have to do to get your frequent flyer miles.
Nothing. You just sign up for it.
I don't even want to think about it. It's like, it's a gimmick to get me to have loyalty to this airline instead of that airline, and it pollutes my whole, I can't explain it, so I don't defend it very well. But
as a frugal traveler, I will say, I think you're missing out on some opportunities. We've got to wrap up, though. But
there are people who have built their careers on getting miles.
Yeah, the points guy.
Yeah, the points guy. Yeah, but I'm the no points guy.
So many points. The points guy will be pulling his hair. What are you doing, Rick?
I'm the travel guy.
All right, thanks everybody so much. It's been great.
Thank you. Thank you.
This episode of the Cascade PBS Ideas Festival podcast was produced by Sarah Bernard and Scott Michael. The live event was produced by Jake Newman and Ann O'Dowd. You can subscribe to this feed wherever you listen to podcasts, and whatever platform you're listening on, please review us. We'd love to know what you think of the show. The Ideas Festival podcast is made possible by listeners like you. Join the members who help fund Cascade PBS original programs. Your donation will be put to work right away, delivering the lineup of podcasts, video docuseries, and daily in-depth reporting you and so many rely on. In addition to supporting our journalism, members receive great member benefits, including Cascade PBS Passport, which provides extended access to an on-demand library of local and PBS favorites. Go to cascadepbs.org/ideasfestivalpod to sign up today. For the latest political, investigative, and cultural coverage from the Pacific Northwest, visit cascadepbs.org. I'm Paris Jackson. We'll be back next week with a live session featuring Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal.